Hey Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call a nighttime vision that ends in your demise?
I don't know. What do you call it?
Deadly Dreams. Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Should have made it multiple nighttime visions to accommodate the plural. I acknowledge my mistake. I had a dream yesterday where I looked up and discovered there were shelves I had never noticed in my apartment, and there were 20 cats living there. I know nobody likes to hear about anyone else's dreams, but I felt like
Very
I had to share that
specific.
one. First, I saw 2 cats on the ground who I expected to see. Then a third cat came out, and I was like, whoa, maybe we've had 3, maybe there have been like cats we've been confusing. And then I looked up.
Feline
There was a
premonition.
whole shelf of cats. Anyway, I'm your apparently cat-obsessed host, Madelyn.
I'm your dog lover host, Emma.
How dare you? You claim that like I'm not a dog lover. You
I
claim
loved
that-
dogs first, before it was cool.
We're here to talk to you about 2 games, one old and one new, as we do here at Talk This on our main episode weeks. And on this particular week, those 2 games are Deadly Premonition and Dreams.
Sure is.
Dreams, which is hard to call a game in itself, in so much a collection of games.
Yes.
But we'll get there.
It is a net of games.
That's an interesting way to describe it.
Thanks.
Speaking of things that would rightly be described as interesting, let's start off our episode by talking about Deadly Premonition.
So, before we talk about like what the game's about, or who made it, or why it exists, I just want to, like, if you've never seen Deadly Premonition, I just want to lay out, I always think it's the opening scene of the game, but it's actually like the 3rd scene, where you're formally introduced to your main character. Because I think it'll give you a good sense of the game without us needing to get into like the lore corner or anything. Throwing some shade at you real quick.
Dang,
right there.
I've closed the door to the lore corner. It's fine. My
So-
coffee told me it'd be a bad idea to go in the lore corner today anyway. Go ahead.
There's the car driving in the rain. There's a guy in the car. There's some big jazz music sort of playing, like the sort of jazz music.
That's what jazz sounds like. Continue.
There's a man in the car. He is smoking and driving and also talking on his phone. He's talking about some people who are in a sort of a codependent relationship to some...
He's also on a computer, for the record.
We haven't shown that yet. Right now,
sorry. I'm sorry.
he's
I
still
didn't know you were doing this
smoking on the
cinematic.
phone.
Go ahead.
He's talking about some people who are in a codependent relationship to whoever is on the phone with him. We pan over, we see he's also looking at photos of violent deaths on his computer. He's talking about some guy named, which one? His name Tom. About how, it's an unhealthy relationship, but it's mutual, so it's fine. And then he mentioned somebody named Jerry. So the person on the phone was asked what he's talking about. He says, well, in the Tom and Jerry show, right? Like, Tom's always asking for it. Jerry's just answering his needs. And then the person doesn't hang up. The signal gets bad, right? It's not the other thing. And this man, who we've had a title card where his character name is Francis York Morgan, instead starts not talking on the phone to somebody named Zach about their last case where he got a scar under his left eye. Because the suspect had razors in their fingernails. There's nobody else in the car. He is just talking to somebody named Zach. That is not his name. He goes to light another cigarette. Can't. He's just trying to get the lighter to light. And then suddenly, ooh, there's a man in a red raincoat in front of him. He swerves the car, goes careening down a hill. For most of it, he is just driving down the hill. And then there's a cut to some squirrels, and they make a monkey noise. And then the car suddenly, like, hits front, but then is somehow sideways so it can roll over. And then Francis York Morgan crawls out of the car. He lights a cigarette. He can't light the one he currently has, so he throws that away and then lights another cigarette. And then he says, "Well, Zach, there goes the civilized world." And then the game proper starts. What does that mean?
The prologue is a wild ride.
I think that sort of sets up the general tone of Deadly Premonition, as well as the main character that you are inhabiting.
It does, except that it misses some things that are also, like, there's just so many things about this game.
I want to point out, because as ridiculous as it is, it's a pretty effective introduction to this guy.
You're right. The only problem is it doesn't tell us that even though his name is
Francis York Morgan.
Right, but you can just call him York. Everybody's always called him that.
Everybody's always called me York. You're right, it misses that classic phrase. Or he looks into his coffee to find messages for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And then he smiles, and you wish that he had never smiled.
So, Deadly Premonition, now that we've had that nice little in media res
table setting
moment, the table is set. It's a 2010 open world survival horror murder mystery from Access Games. And that description gives you absolutely no idea what this game is. You're hearing that, you're like, oh, interesting. It's like if you took Resident Evil and you combined it with, like, some Ace Attorney elements, maybe. And even that is not totally inaccurate, but also it's completely inaccurate.
Yes.
So the game originally came out for PS3 and Xbox 360. You can now get it on your computer, and it's also it's the same game, but it's called Deadly Premonition Origins on the Switch, which is pretty ominous, I have to say. Taking your original game and retitling it Origins.
I think they announced that they were re-releasing on the Switch at the same time they announced the sequel, so that kind of makes sense.
Still ominous. The game was originally going to be a game called Rainy Woods, which was in development for 3 years, from 2004 to 2007. And then they canceled it for some kind of technical issues, which it does not really seem could have possibly been resolved in the final product of this game. But they took the environments and stuff that they'd made, and instead they turned it into Deadly Premonition. Yeah, it's... So, like, the most common comparison you sort of see for it is that it's kind of like Twin Peaks, which for some people might be a great selling point for the game. It is a bad selling point for me, as someone who's watched the pilot of Twin Peaks, I think 3 times, and each time been like, I don't think so. I
mean, I haven't watched Twin Peaks either, but I do have a feeling it's a show where you just have to get past the pilot, right? But I don't even know if that's it's a valid comparison, but I don't think it fully sums up. Like, you can't really just say, like, oh, it's Twin Peaks the game.
Well, it does have some notable similarities. So it's set in a fictional town in the Pacific Northwest, specifically Greenvale, Washington, which I'm going to do my best to not call Greendale throughout, despite the superior television show. So, you know, it's one of that weird tiny mini niche genre of games made by Japanese artists that are set in America. Spooky games made by Japanese artists that are set in America. That it shares with things like Silent Hill.
They actually went to small towns in America to do research for this game. Sounds like they were like looking at like where crosswalks were and like how streets were set up.
Thank God.
Yeah. Like, I think the key part of this game to remember is even though it's a mess, you can tell that the people working on it, like, worked on it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it has a lot of weird, really, like, detailed parts, and then it's just falling apart in execution, basically.
So in this game, we haven't really given you an idea of actually what's happening in this game. You've just gotten Emma's description.
What is happening in this game?
I mean, that's fair. That's a difficult question to answer. But to give sort of an overall gloss, you play as Detective York, FBI, and you've come to this small town in Washington to do some detective work because there's been a young woman who's been murdered in a way that, man, is real True Detective-y. Someone at True Detective was a big fan of this game. And was like, hey, let's use this. But it's been murdered in this kind of like showy, grotesque art style way, basically.
There's like a tree, right? She's like,
yeah,
on a tree.
Yeah, like, yes. And you're investigating it because it's really similar to these like string of murders that's been happening around the country. And the people in the town tell you about the raincoat killer, who only kills people when it's raining. And so it's your job as a detective to figure out who the murderer is. Emma's closed the door to the lore corner, which is good, because I don't really think I could adequately explain it. But some more people die. Everyone in the town is real weird. Which I guess makes sense if they actually came and researched small towns in America. But everyone in the town is real weird. And in the end, there's some twists.
Thanks, Mel.
You're welcome. And who is Zach? You do find out.
I think it's probably more accurate. Rather than saying you're playing as York, you are playing as Zach.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, one of the beginning things, like, he's talking to you, and you press a button to answer. He's like, good, I thought you were asleep. Or, like, so, it's set in a town, it's like an open world in the town, so you can get in a car and drive around and stuff. And if you, like, stop the car away from your objective, he's like, oh, Zach, this isn't where we're supposed to be, but I'll follow your gut. So it's more like you're tagging along with him as Zach, giving him, like, what he should be doing.
Slight spoiler, there's a split personality thing.
I don't really know if that's... I think that's pretty clear from the get-go, unless you really think, like, Zach is some invisible man just standing next to him.
When he talks to Zach, he puts his finger up to his ear as if he has some kind of a Bluetooth.
He puts it more, like, at his temple, though.
It's unclear, right? But as if he has some kind of a thing that he has to touch to talk to Zach. He's an FBI agent. They've got tech.
Sure, yeah. Sure, they've got tech.
Anyway, as Emma said, this is kind of a tale of two games. So, there's the survival horror sections, where you're out killing ghosty things, zombie things, whatever they are.
Yes, it is
in the woods.
Bad Resident Evil. The Origins version, and I guess would assume some of the other later versions, just gives you... I think it just gives you infinite ammo, basically.
Yeah, the playthrough I saw, the gun had infinite ammo.
Yeah, so, because they are like, yeah, these suck. And so they take away in the re-release, they've taken away some of the difficulty from it, so you can kind of just, like, pop your way through.
Speaking of Greendale.
I know.
Yeah, I watched up until basically he goes into town, a playthrough. And yeah, it's like they found a jar of pickles. Mm-hmm. Just at random, which was interesting. And yeah, we're just like hacking their way through fences. It was weird. There was like some weird little things.
I mean, you're theoretically supposed to feed York and have York sleep.
What pickles is for.
And change his clothes and shave his beard, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I don't really think there's any penalty for a lot of that, for not doing it, except I saw someone, like, you're, like, get, like, a stinky agent trophy if you don't have him shower.
So
and flies follow you around, also.
We get into the other side of the game, which is really what the developers wanted the game to be. Fun fact, the combat was actually added super last minute because they were making this game kind of on purpose to target the Western market. It's not aimed at the Japanese audience, it's really aimed at a Western audience. Which is bold, right? Like, imagine if, like, an American developer was like, we're gonna make this game to target Japan. Like, China, sure. Developers definitely make games to target China, right? But, like, imagine they were gonna make this game set in small town Japan to target the Japanese market. It would just be bold, that's all. It'd just be bold. I'm always impressed by these, like, games that are like, yeah, it's gonna be in small town America. And these guys actually went, but the games where it's like, it's gonna be in small town America, and we're gonna guess what that's like.
Yeah.
But yeah, they added the combat sections at the last minute because the publishers, I think, were worried that the game wasn't gonna sell if it didn't have combat. So it's pretty bad. But then the other half of the game is, as Emma said, you doing your detective thing around Greenvale. And you have a sleepiness meter, and you have a hunger meter, and you have a hit points meter, and you can also get, like, tired from, like, physically tired from running. And so I thought it was funny that if your sleepiness meter hits 0, you get hungrier faster. Just legit.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that's true.
Like,
that's how it works.
If you're really hungry, it affects your health points. I don't really know what the consequences are of that, but there's some game-based stuff going on there. But the idea was, I mean, basically to do Red Dead Redemption 2 before Red Dead Redemption 2. Where everything was going to be hyper-realistic. All of the NPCs follow a 24-hour schedule. 24-hour game time, to be clear. This is not an Animal Crossing situation. But they have, like, their daily routines, and, like, you have certain times that you have to meet up with people, and all that stuff. So they follow a schedule routine. You can't just, like, your car is not, like, I mean, in some ways it is, right? But it's not like Grand Theft Auto, where it's like, oh, I'm going to crash it, and I'm going to grab a new car. It's like, you have to maintain and take care of your car, fill it up with gas, all of that stuff. And yeah, like Emma said, you do have to change your clothes periodically, or you attract flies.
Yeah, like, it's part of the thing that, like, you can tell, like, this isn't just, like, you've seen things on, like, bad movies and bad games that people still really love, and I think part of the key of that is that it doesn't feel like the people making it are making fun of it, right? Like, they're working on it seriously, and are passionate about it. And you can really see that in, like, how ambitious these ideas were. And, like, the 24-hour cycle, I think, is really cool. And part of the reason that's really cool is because of this raincoat killer guy that had used to terrorize the town. They, like, are pretty superstitious about going out in the rain. So they'll have, like, their 24-hour routines, but then suddenly when it rains, you can't find anybody because they're all just not, they won't go out in it. And stuff like that. So you can tell that they were, like, thinking about what they were doing. It was just that all of their ambitions for it seemed to be outside of their actual ability to do it. Yes. I was reading, like, their post-mortem with, they have, like, the 5 things that went right and the 5 things that went wrong. And, like, all the things that went right were, like, the performative aspects of it. So, like, the story and the characters and the music and such. And all the things that went wrong.
That might not be, saying the music went right might be a stretch. Go on.
It depends on what you think. But what went wrong, just to say it, is 1, memory allocation and processing speed. 2, lighting and shadow processing. 3, using the physics engine. 4, sound effects and surround sound. and 5, schedule management and motivation.
It's like literally everything about making it a game as opposed to any other form of art went wrong.
The physics engine is really interesting also, just because they just wanted to use it on everything, but if you're using the physics engine on everything, it doesn't run very well.
Yeah.
So they had to figure out, so they had like started with like everything, and then were like very slowly parsing down what they could actually use the physics engine on, which ended up not being very many things.
I read they had problems of like they wanted to cheat it in places, but this particular engine they were using really did not allow that.
It was like physics or not seemed to be the choices. Which generally, like when you're making something fictional, you want things to feel physics, but sometimes you don't want them to be actual physics because it doesn't, it's not cinematically correct or something like that. So it makes it difficult. It was purely be difficult to work with all of the technical elements that they're working on their game.
Well, based on all you've heard from us so far, it might not surprise you to hear that the reviews for this game were pretty hit or miss. To the point where it holds a Guinness World Record for the most critically polarizing survival horror game.
Oh, wow. That's a tough category.
Guinness World Records are a load of hooey.
I was with you. I thought you were just going to say game. I was like, that's fine. But no, specifically survival horror. You gotta wonder what the most polarizing game period would be, though.
I do not know. They were not willing to take that kind of a stand in the Guinness book, apparently.
They just had it by genre.
Yeah.
You'd think once you narrowed it down by genre, you could just, like, pick from among those, though.
Well, I do want to read from... So if you tuned in last week, you heard us talking about reviews in our side quest, where we talked about, like, oh, why would... Like, what's the difference between a 2 and a 5, right? Like, it's all a don't buy. Why would you ever give it something that low? Because, like, 5 is good enough to kill it, right?
Yeah.
But here it is, a 2 out of 10 from IGN. I want to read a little, like, this kind of summary of this from them.
Sure.
Because it's pretty brutal, is what it is. Here we go. So, quote, and this is from kind of the end of review summary. Awful in nearly every way. The Twin Peaks meets Resident Evil with a dash of Grand Theft Auto formula sounds pretty great, but it was well beyond the capabilities of this development team. Terrible controls, terrible pacing, terrible sound effects, terrible visuals. Maybe you can convince yourselves these things don't matter as you work through this surreal and quirky storyline. The rest of us will be off playing better video games.
Wow.
Like, zing.
You know, I'm just going to say, bad game review to say other players are dumb. I think that's bad practice.
Yeah, I do too. Well, clearly clearly that's in response to places like Destructoid giving it a 10 out of 10.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things, like, it's either really clicks with you, or, like, it just does not. Is one of those games.
It's fascinating to me because I can't think of very many games that really scratch the so bad it's good cult classic kind of B-movie thing that is such a trope in movies, right?
Yeah.
I feel like so bad it's good is such a movie thing. Or even such a television show. Movies and TV have like a lot of those. And it's difficult to think of video games that hit those boxes. Like, you can think of games that are guilty pleasures, right? But that's not this. This is a train wreck that some people love.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of any in particular, and this is certainly the most famous example of it. And the director of this has made a wide variety of different games. I played The Missing last year, which is very different. Well, it's different from this, but it has some of the sort of surreal aspects still, but it is not Deadly Premonition. But there's something just charming about it. I haven't played it myself. I've watched a lot of it out of curiosity. And, like, it's just charming. I don't know. It's hard to put your finger on what it is. I think part of it comes down to York is just such a character to follow. Like, he has very specific quirks, and when you're driving around, he'll talk to Zach about, like, he used to be, like, a punk rocker or something, so he'll talk about, like, punk music.
Of course he did.
And other past cases that you've had and stuff like that. And he's just always taught you, like, you're just hanging out with him, you know? This very weird man.
It's obviously something that not all games can replicate, because tonally it would be very wrong in most cases. But having the main character talk to you, like the player, as a distinct character, is definitely an effective way to create that sense of distance that some very high-profile AAA games are struggling with in the character identification space right now.
Yeah.
It is, like, I do think that it probably makes this game function a little bit better, because this guy is wild, right?
Yeah.
And if you were going to be literally... It's such a fine-grained distinction, but I'm sure that story-wise it functions better to have that layer of distance where you're not literally being asked to identify with this wild man.
Yeah.
Who is stinky. He's a wild, stinky man.
I mean, it also just gives more excuse to have him, like, talking.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's weird that he's talking to Zach when you're driving in the car, but it would be weirder if he was just talking out loud to himself.
Yeah.
And the drives probably wouldn't really function at all if there was no conversation.
Yeah.
So I do think, like, having Zach is an important part of what makes the game sort of snap, crackle, pop, as they say.
Because otherwise, in the end, you're just chasing after an evil traveling tree salesman. Leaf,
Exactly.
I'm looking at you.
Look
Watch
forward
out.
to Deadly Premonition 2 coming out next month.
Yeah, this was very timely, right?
Instead of a car, he has a skateboard.
Skateboard! When I saw that, I freaked.
So good. I mean, there must be some technical reason for why you can't have a car in this one, but yeah, just give him a skateboard. That's the solution.
So, just a little teaser for the sequel. So, Deadly Premonition 2, A Blessing in Disguise. What a title. It's set in the year 2005. You're playing as Agent York again, and you're going to this small town outside of New Orleans for another serial murder case with Zach.
It actually seems to be both a prequel and a sequel.
God, that's a lot.
Yeah, which you can tell because in the scenes where he's in, what is it, Lycaon?
Yeah, I don't know.
He doesn't have the scar that he points out from the woman with the razors in her nails.
You also seem to have a little girl who's your assistant.
Yeah, because you gotta. That's what Western gamers want these days.
You're right, they do want dad games. Oh, that's so targeted. Oh, man.
Except it's just like this weird, twisted version of the dad game because it's Francis York Morgan as the dad, and there's no way that works.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. The comments on the trailers for these are so funny. Because everyone's like, this looks terrible! As it should be.
Yeah.
Like, the graphics for this look like at home on a PS1. Wouldn't have it any other way.
I think that's a little uncharitable, too. I think they're more PS2, maybe PS3 graphics sometimes.
These ones look better. That was a lot of the complaint with the original one, was like, it was on the PS3, but they were like, this is pretty rough even for PS2.
Yeah.
And these ones look a little better.
Yeah. It's pretty rough for PlayStation 4, Switch.
It's
even.
a Switch game.
You're right. It is a Switch game.
Still.
A little less rough for Switch, but still.
Still pretty rough. One last thing I will say before we kind of shift over to Dreams is that from what I read, the original price of this game was $20. Which, for a game that is, like, easily a 20-hour... Like, it's a 20-hour game, and there's a lot of ambitious stuff going on, and is a mess. Like, it makes it much easier to have those warm cult classic feelings towards.
Sure, yeah.
As opposed to, I don't know. I wonder how people will feel... What is this? The Switch game costs $50, right?
I don't know. I haven't looked it up.
I'm pretty sure it does.
I'm not planning to pre-order it, so...
Me either. But even the versions of the game that you can buy now cost more than it did when it came out. It's the director's cut. They've updated it just a little bit. But it's still a 7-year-old game, even the director's cut.
Yeah. Well, that's capitalism for ya.
Hey, yeah, it is. To close, a quote from Swery, the director of the game, about the game. As I said, the original concept of this game is living in and feeling part of the town. Even if the player is an efficient FBI agent, he will also become hungry, sleepy, and stinky if he didn't bathe at all. This doesn't change even if zombies appear in the town, or even if serial murders occur. It also means we are not perfect, just human. I wanted to bring reality into the game using those factors.
Isn't that right, Zach?
Alright, let's emerge out of our ill-fated coffee, put Zach aside, and talk about Dreams.
Yeah. So Dreams is a game project from Media Molecule, the creators of Little Big Planet, in which they're sort of leaning into the community aspect of Little Big Planet, of how you can make levels and then share those levels online and play online levels that other people have made, but then they take it to a greater extreme by giving you more freedom over what you can put in the level and what sorts of things you can make in it. So it's basically like they're giving you a game engine in which you don't just have to make games. You can make films or stories or music or animations or whatever.
Which presumably you could do in a game engine.
Yeah. But you have an engine, and then you also have access to the things that other people have made in that engine. So you have, like, dream building and dream surfing, I think is how they refer to it as. Because I played I actually put it in. Wow, Emma. How long have you had this? Several months.
Not that long. It only came out this year. So,
well, this year.
It was an early access.
But yeah. But I played the tutorial. There's a couple of the tutorial levels for how to use the engine, and it shockingly, it just feels like a game engine.
But see, you have the context to know what that feels like.
Yeah.
I imagine for the majority of the people playing the game, they would not be like, oh, feels like a game engine.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just like the context of, like, you know, like, this is how you pan through the scene. This is how you move back and forth. This is how you can zoom in on an object or rotate around an object. Here's how you rotate an object. Here's how you clone an object. It's like a very simplified, like the simple basic stuff, at least of what I've done. There's tons of tutorials that probably go deeper in depth to what you can actually do and make. But the sort of basic way you move throughout the editor space just feels like
Dreamscape.
The dreamscape.
The dream
feels like a game engine. Which is just, it's weird, that's all. It's odd from my perspective as someone, like you said, is in a game engine. Somewhat frequently.
Someone who's in a game engine. It's weird for you. As a game character.
That's not what I meant. Someone
who was rendered in engine. Someone made with Unreal.
Someone who uses a game engine somewhat frequently in my day-to-day life to have, like, funky game engine, you know? Hip game engine.
Game
Sort of
engine
what
with
it feels
imps.
like. Yeah. I had to pick my imp.
I did too. What imp did you pick?
He's red and kind of grumpy.
Mine was a pink smiley one. Because Josh was watching, I didn't want him worried about me. So yeah, so the sort of the gimmick of, well, some of the gimmick of Dreams is, right, you have this little imp guy, which is this little circular fuzzy dude with a pointy head that you basically use like a mouse cursor.
Yeah.
And can be part of your games as well.
They have it set up default using the motion controls. I didn't even try that.
Oh, I didn't know I could, well, maybe in the demo you can't turn them off. I did not know you could turn them off.
Maybe you can in the demo. They like prompted me to pick before it got started. But I just switched the things because I do not know how you would manage this by moving your controller. I mean, maybe it becomes intuitive once you keep doing it, but I was not willing to expend the effort.
It was a key part of at least one of the games that I played, being able to use the motion control.
That's true.
So I'll say that. But yeah, I can't imagine. Like, it's hard enough for me sometimes to use like my like computer drawing tablet. And this feels like that times a million. So yeah, it's tough to call Dreams a game, because even more than Little Big Planet, like they have it's called Art's Dream, I think. They have this like little story game about a jazz musician that you can kind of play to get used to what the game looks like and how it operates. But it's really like, you know, Little Big Planet has like a whole. I feel like I'm the only person on the planet that enjoyed Little Big Planet.
Yeah, I know. I was so
Yeah.
shocked when they announced like the Sackboy's Big Adventure, and they're like, "Where's the level creator?" I was like, "You used the level? Did you?"
Yeah.
Or like, I saw people being like, "Oh, they made it into a platformer," and I was so confused. I was
It
like,
was only a platformer.
It's always been a platformer. Oh well.
Dreams got a lot of press right after it dropped for real for some recreations of games and for the rampant copyright infringement that was taking place.
Yeah. How they seem to be handling it, Media Molecule, is just like, as they receive complaints, they take stuff down. They're not actively going in to take stuff down, which actually poses problems for when people use other Sony properties, because they are Sony. But if they were to go in and remove Sony things, you could make an argument that they need to be doing that for everything, as opposed to what they're doing right now.
Right.
So it's hard. They actually sort of can't do that for Sony
That's
properties.
so funny.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, well, I guess I know why you would want to, because there's some weird stuff. Have you seen Yoshi versus Shrek Train?
Nope, but I can imagine.
There it is. Yoshi gets killed by a Shrek train.
And the thing is, now that I've played in the engine a little bit, like, wow, the amount of effort that must go in to making stuff like Yoshi versus Shrek Train is like non-zero.
Yeah.
It probably took them at least an hour.
Yeah. Well, so the cool thing though is, right, and what's kind of really neat about Dreams is the ability to use other people's work. So somebody just has to have made a good Shrek, you know?
That's fair.
You don't have to have been able to do it. You just have to make it big and put it on a train.
That's fair. You still have to make the train move and stuff, though.
It didn't really.
Never mind then.
It was really more just one shot, like panels.
I see.
Really more of a cartoon kind of aesthetic.
Still some effort went in there. I applaud the effort.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what is it? Hit Record, the Joseph Gordon-Levitt's music thing.
The whole remixing aesthetic of it.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, it reminds me of TikTok.
Yeah.
To be a little bit more hip with 2020 here.
There you go. Fine.
Dropping that I've heard of TikTok. The Gen Zs can roast me for saying I've heard of TikTok.
The TikTok.
The TikTok.
The TikToks, you might say.
There you go. So yeah, I played a couple of they have like a selection of games that rotates that are available in the demo. So I played one called, I can't remember what it was actually called, but it was a left-handed cooking simulator. So like you control like where your hand is, like horizontally with the left stick and vertically with the right stick, and then you can grab things. I was real bad at it.
That's kind of the point of those kinds of games.
I know. I mean, definitely it was. I set the steak on fire. I threw everything on the ground. I didn't manage to get anything on the plate. It was pretty rough. And then I played someone had made kind of a robot-y platformer thing. Then I played some of two that was pretty good.
The one thing with Dreams that I think they are still working on and figuring out is they've said things about, like, you own what you make in Dreams. But there's also currently no way to take what you've made off of Dreams. They have some sort of beta program right now for some of the people who are in early access that you can apply to. But they do not seem to have figured out how to actually deal with ownership in a meaningful way.
So from what I've seen, they're very good at like crediting.
Yeah.
Right? So even if your stuff turns up in somebody else's game, I think you end up credited in some way, which is cool.
I had to opt into being credited for their promotional purposes.
Oh yeah, I did
at the start of the game
in the demo as well, even though I was not allowed to create anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because presumably they want the content to stay on Dreams, so people will pay for Dreams.
Yeah.
To play on Dreams. It does feel like the kind of game that could eventually go free to play, although I then don't know how they would monetize it.
Yeah.
Other than advertisements, which would feel the whole dream world of it is so calmingly aesthetic, I guess, that it would having pop-up ads would certainly cut into that. Maybe the ads would have to be created in Dreams. That'd be kind of dope.
Dreams to me, like, if you're someone who wants to make games for a living, you are probably better served just getting Unity or Unreal.
Yeah.
And working with those. But it's a neat tool for somebody who just wants to make things for fun, you know? Or I saw people suggesting it as like somewhere you could make like rough prototypes. Perhaps easier than you would in Unity or Unreal, since they have all these assets that are already there. Not that, I mean, Unity and Unreal do too, but you have to pay for more of them. So, like, there's some uses to it, but it's not, at least at this point, especially since you can't take things off of, it sort of feels like it's not like a professional thing for you to use. It's a thing to have fun while creating.
Yeah,
with.
It's a fancier, more professional looking Little Big Planet level designer.
Yeah.
That can do more things. And is pretty shareable as video clips. But it does seem to me like a game that has a lot of potential to like fight with Minecraft as an educational game.
Yeah.
In a certain sense.
No, I was thinking that the little girls might have fun with this.
Yeah.
Since they liked the...
Yes.
They liked trying out the Little Big Planet level editor sometimes.
Well, and there's so much more to try in this. Like, even just the, 6 games I could look at were so different. But yeah, it's certainly, it's hard to tell what they want it to be.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it being a platform for just, like, creative expression, which is something that they, I was going to say pay a lot of lip service to, but, like, you know, media is very much a part of, like, media molecules. The kind of games that they make are really into these creativity and sharing, and Dreams is very hippy-dippy about it. It's like, you're going to be the creator.
Yeah. I think they were at PAX both years we went, and both times they had, like, a beanbag chair sort of
Yeah, I remember it especially because we were not going to be hanging out in beanbag chairs this year.
Yeah.
But I remember, too, last year, year and a half ago, however you refer to 2019, hanging out in the beanbag chairs for a while because we were tired.
Yeah.
And they were comfy.
Yeah.
But it does feel like an interesting way, you know, both to create educational games that kids can play. I don't know how easy it is to share, like, a specific game for people to find.
There's a website for it where, like, if you have a link and you go to the link, you can save it for later if you're logged in.
That's cool.
And it'll turn up on the game for you, so you can find it again.
Well, it seems like it has potential in that area, although obviously right now it's restricted to PlayStation. So, you know, Minecraft has a head start in that regard. But also as a you know, intro to game design kind of platform.
Yeah.
You can get around having to be an artist, basically.
Yeah.
To do any of it. Because who needs artistry in games? No one.
Nobody. No, I mean, they have all these tutorials that you can go through for building the game. So, like, they have stuff to help you review how to move the camera and how to manipulate objects. But then some of the more advanced ones are, like, there's, like, a lighting and atmosphere tutorial. Right? So, like, it'll teach you how to do everything in that. Pretty step-by-step wise, too. Because I was doing some of the camera controls again, and I was just skipping it. I was skipping ahead of the guy.
Did you, as a person who's comparing this to an actual game engine, or a game engine that can be used for a product that is beyond Dreams anyway, did you feel like any of the stuff that you learned there would be translatable to other engines? I
mean, ish. It feels similar. It's just that you're using a controller instead of the mouse and keyboard, right? So, I mean, I only know the basics of, like, camera controls and engines.
I gotcha. I just mean, is the way that you do it in Dreams similar enough to the way that you do it in another engine that...
I mean, yeah, they have similar controls. Like, you can move around the scene, and then if you hold something down and move, it'll pan it instead of moving you. You can, like, click on an object to move it or rotate it, or there's ways to move around an object in 3D game editors and stuff like that. So yeah, it has all the basic tools for movement. It's just that I think it's a little simpler in that you can find the things you want for free without really having to model anything. And it just feels, it feels more casual because you have a cute thing that you're using to put stuff down, right?
Well, it feels like they should have put more money into marketing this to parents at their wits' end this pandemic.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've heard a lot less about Dreams since the initial, like, somebody made Crash Bandicoot, somebody made that Silent Hill game.
Somebody made, I saw, like, they put their TV down on the dining room table, and they had a pool stick, and it would register the real pool stick hitting the pool balls on the TV. Like, I think it had maybe the motion controller attached or something. But yeah, like, just watching it was like, what? Like, how do you do that?
I'm just saying, it's an educational game. Feels like somebody should have rapidly developed a curriculum and jumped on this and profited.
I mean, maybe it hasn't been out to the public for that long.
No, I know.
I think it came out in the fall-ish.
I thought it was this year. I'll confirm that.
Time is meaningless.
It was like pre-pandemic, but not that much. That's always funny.
So, I mean, anybody who wants to make a curriculum would have to be using this and learning it themselves, and then making the curriculum around it. So,
You're right. It came out on February 4th. It came out on Valentine's Day of this year.
Time is meaningless.
Indeed.
I really thought it was the fall.
Anyway, Minecraft better watch its back. That's all I'm
Yeah.
saying. So you want to mash these up?
Let's do it.
So first of all, I'll say Deadly Premonition already feels like you could probably remake it in Dreams and it might look better.
Deadly Premonition and Dreams. Done.
That's not the mashup.
Next week.
That was a joke. That was not the mashup.
Yeah, like, you're an investigator. Okay.
Okay.
And you
This
have
is
this
already
thing.
going in a fun direction.
You
Okay.
have this thing in your head that's sort of imp-like. You know, it's like a little fuzzy thing
Imp
that
in your
lives
head.
in your
Good.
head that you talk to.
Good.
And when you're trying to figure things out, right, like, you go into your head and the imp, like, takes you on a journey of creativity.
Right, like a brain puzzle.
Or whatever, yeah.
Or a brain like you have to build. Yeah, okay.
So, the way it works is you're trying to figure out the crime. And you
I've
can
not-
either, like, set up, like, you have the environment the crime took place, and you can sort of interact with it and add stuff to it and subtract stuff from it to sort of figure stuff out. Or if you're attached to the online component, you can go into other people's ideas to sort of see what they're thinking about in terms of the crime and what they've set up to sort of help them figure it out.
Yeah, I
and
was
then
thinking
use
you could
those ideas
also... You could set, yeah, so like you're thinking like we can set up, like we can see the actual scene of the crime, and then we can go into our brain and we can like set up a model of it, basically.
Yeah.
That's kind of dope. That's not at all where I was thinking of this mashup going, but that's kind of neat.
Nice.
What's the crime? Like, give me more of the, like, that's a neat mechanic. I like that as like our fundamental mechanic. What's going on in the world?
I feel like maybe it needs to be more... Like, maybe you have, like, an overarching crime you have to solve over the course of the game, but I think it needs to also be a little bit more episodic, a la, like, LA Noire or any procedural police TV show.
Sure.
So that you can have more than one sort of crime to be working with in your head. But then maybe as you set up all these different dioramas of different crimes, you start seeing, like, the connecting elements of the overarching case. Or something like that.
And eventually will we open this up for players to create their own crime scene? Like, not just be able to consult other people's models, but for them to actually create their own crime scenes?
Yeah. Why not?
Cases to solve. Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Love that, love that.
Like, we'll have, like, a preloaded sort of storyline like they do in Dreams to, like, sort of show off what it is. And
I think it needs to be more extensive than the
yeah.
version in
Well,
Dreams,
yeah. I mean, yeah, more than that, but, you know, whatever. And then you can, like, players can make their own, like, side stories sort of thing.
Can we model conversations with other characters in our heads, too? Like, when we're talking to characters, can we, like, test out how the conversation will go?
The more you use the head mechanic, I think the better. So
yeah, it's like you can kind of, like, set what you think their personality values are and pick your answer, and it'll spit out a response, but obviously you can be wrong with their personality.
Yeah.
Interesting. My idea was going to be it's Dreams, but the only assets available to you are, like, PS2 quality.
Retro Dreams.
It's like, it just has to be so bad it's good.
The only animal sound you have is monkeys.
Yeah, that would be it. It'd be like Dreams, but, like, you are, with each time you have to make something, you have specific limits. So, like, you can only use a monkey sound, your graphics can only be PS2 quality, like, there has to be breaking the fourth wall.
That's
like,
good.
Certain challenges.
Yeah.
Which Dreams sort of does, I think, with their community jams, but not like this.
Yeah. I like that too.
Well, dang. Nice.
There we go.
I still
And
think yours
as
is
you
more
said,
exciting.
it would be a bad matchup week.
I just thought Dreams was going to be really hard. I was like, there's nothing here. But I like how you set it up. Kudos, you proved me wrong. So, folks, would you buy our detective game with a game engine in his brain game?
I have to think of a catchier slogan, I think.
Hook us up with your publishers, because we've got the skills to make a Deadly Premonition quality
No, we
game.
don't.
I'm just kidding. That was a joke. That was a joke about their ambitions and their skills not lining up.
We could not even make that.
I'm just kidding. Obviously, we do not have that ability. It was just a joke. But what's not a joke is that you should follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talk This Podcast, and we're on YouTube, also at Talk This Podcast. I need to adjust my speech now that we're at Talk This Podcast, not Talk This Sisters.
Oops.
But all of them Talk This Podcast, even easier than ever. It's going to take me like 3 months to get that right. Get excited for it. My coffee tells me that one day I'll get it right. So yeah, follow us on social media, but also check out our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read more about the show, see the games that Emma's about to pull from in the hat, and also see our blog featuring long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend, where my boyfriend is playing through the Kingdom Hearts series. He's almost done. And Split Screen, where Emma and I are watching Coffee Prince and My Hero Academia, with lots of thoughts on both of those. A lot of Shrek talk this week, although you won't see the Shrek split screen for a couple of weeks. But know that it's coming again. And finally, most importantly, if you like what you heard today, you should subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode on Sundays at noon. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora, on the online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Cast, podcast, wherever, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find Talk This. So that's it from me on the promotional front. Emma, do you want to tell the people what we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks, our next two games?
Our next two games, our old game will be Borderlands.
Dope. Man, we haven't talked about Borderlands yet?
Yeah, I know. It's been on the list
crazy,
for a while.
That's crazy, because that game is mad funny.
It's the only mad funny game. And the new game is going to be
listeners.
What the Golf.
Those are going to go great.
They
I'm
are. I
excited
think they
for a
are.
zombie golf game. That's going to be good. That's going to be real good.
I don't know what we're talking about next week yet. I need a little bit more time to think about it.
Well, tune in next week for whatever Emma's side quest is going to be. It's usually more thought through than mine, so you should be ready for it. It'll be an interesting topic. It always is.
Don't put the pressure on or anything.
It'll be about the game that she's created in Dreams.
Oh, no.
But yeah, tune in next week for that on our side quest, and in 2 weeks to hear us talk Mad Funny Borderlands, and what is no doubt mad funny, although Borderlands is the only mad funny game, What the Golf. It's sure to be an episode that you just won't want to miss. Unless, of course, you're playing Deadly Premonition 2, in which case I would understand why you'd miss it. Just come back when you're ready. So that's it from us this week, listeners. Thanks for tuning in to another show. And Emma, do you want to give them some wishes for the week?
This week, I hope that the man in your head is listening to you.